A few years ago, actually, it was 2009, before the pandemic started, I managed to visit the tomb of Mother Angelica. And for those who haven't visited United States, she's buried in the shrine of the Blessed Sacrament in Huntsville, Alabama. And if you ever get a chance to go over there, it's actually a very beautiful part of America. Alabama itself, it's practically the same size as Ireland, or I think it's even a little bit bigger. And the northern part of it, up from Birmingham upwards, all of that area, very green, beautiful driving around. And in the middle of nowhere, really, it's in the middle of nowhere. You in the middle of a field, she built the shrine of the Blessed Sacrament. And I always wanted to visit there. So when I was over there, early 2019, I got in the car and drove the interstate from Atlanta over to visit the shrine, the tomb of Mother Angelica in Huntsville, Alabama. And this shrine is stunning. It's absolutely beautiful. I mean, you're in awe at the beauty of what she left for the church. One thing that did impact me when you went into this shrine of the Blessed Sacrament was she had a little leaflet there about the Novus Ordo and kind of explaining what the Second Vatican Council wanted. And she had the priests celebrating the Novus Ordo ad Orientem. She had the communion rails and the communion rail altar cloth. People only receive communion kneeling on the tongue. It was just it was reverent. And I even remember some Americans that were there visiting the shrine said, "Oh, look, Novus Ordo ad Orientem, reverence for the Eucharist. Isn't this strange? You never see this anywhere else." And I was just fascinated by the conversations that were going on. Some traditional Catholics would go there and say, "Oh, look, this is quite amazing," because if you ever listen to what Mother Angelica spoke about the Eucharist, and it's all, you just have to go on YouTube and Google Mother Angelica Eucharist, and you can listen to all her talks that she did on the Eucharist. She loved her Lord. She had an intimate relationship with our Lord. There was no doubt about it. She wouldn't have been able to do what she did otherwise. This amazing woman, a saint of the church, there's no doubt about it. You just have to listen to her. She brings you into a deeper relationship with Christ. That's a real mark of a saint. She wasn't leading people to herself, she was leading people to Christ. And if a woman like that that's able to bring you into a deeper relationship with Christ is a saint, there's no doubt. That's my experience. Anyway, the first time I visited there, I hadn't done my research, and they've a Eucharistic Center just in front of the shrine. So any of you've been to Huntsville, Alabama, you'll know there's a Eucharistic shrine. It was closed that day. I couldn't get in to visit it, and it was February. It was cold. I mean, it wasn't cold when I arrived there, but it was winter still. So I said, look, it was quiet that day. I visited the shrine, did some adoration, confessions, went down to the tomb. She's buried below, and visited her grave, and said, oh, okay, well, look, someday when I come back there, I'll visit the Eucharistic Center. Well, a few months later, that same year, in 2019, September 2019, I did manage to go back, and I had a free weekend while I was working in the States. And I said, oh, look, I'll go back to Huntsville, Alabama this weekend and see that center, that John Paul II Eucharistic Center in Huntsville, Alabama. So I went back there, and it was the day of El Niño Jesus, the child Jesus. If you go to Huntsville, Alabama, in the center of the plaza in front of the shrine, there's a statue to the child Jesus, El Niño Jesus. And it was a Latino day. There was lots of Mexicans. There was Mexican food, which I love. Lived in Mexico, and it was really a feast day for all the Spanish speaking population of that area. It was the shrine was packed there, and they had mass outside. There was a grotto there outside. They had tents up to eat food, and that same day I managed to get into this center, this Eucharistic Center, which is really a museum. It's a museum. It charters all the Eucharistic miracles. It charters the history of the Eucharist, the different forms of worship, how the Mass developed, the theology of the Eucharist. I mean, everything you want to know about the Eucharist is in that center. I mean, if you wanted to catechize a child about the Eucharist, you could easily bring them there to that center for the day and easily help them to catechize, to plant the seed of the faith in that person, to catechize them on the Eucharist. And when I came back to Ireland, I just thought, we need something like this in Ireland. We need a center for the Eucharist. There needs to be somewhere in Ireland where we can bring our kids to be catechized on the Eucharist, where you can make it a day out for them that they will remember. And the place that this needs to happen is Knock. And I did try and reach out and meet people to organise something like this in Knock, but I suppose it didn't work out that year, and then the pandemic hit, and so things didn't progress forward. But I think the time is now coming when we need to retake this challenge to open people's hearts to that encounter with Christ in the Eucharist. It's not, when my kids were being catechized for the Eucharist, they called it holy bread, and you'll get the holy bread, and they taught them how to receive the Eucharist in the hand. There was no kneeling, there was no reverence. It was almost as if we were teaching our kids to receive the communion as Protestants in the whole theology and how we talked even about the Eucharist, holy bread. And I had to say to them, no, it's not holy bread. It's not holy. It's like you've put it down to the same level as holy water. You go into the church, you bless yourself with holy water, and you get some holy bread. I mean, the Orthodox and the Greek Catholics, when they leave the church, they give them little pieces of little buns of bread, or little small loaves of bread, and that is holy bread, but it's not consecrated. It's not the Eucharist. The Eucharist is totally different. It's given during the Mass, and it's the body, blood, soul, and divinity of our Lord. But you also, leaving the church, they give them small little pieces of bread, which is holy bread. And you can see the reason why so many people don't believe in the Eucharist is we haven't catechized them on what the Eucharist is, who the Eucharist is, who are you encountering, and sowing in them that amazing reality of knowing Christ more. So I really do credit Mother Angelica for spurring me on, because after those two visits in 2019, this was before I had this channel, this was before I was blogging, kind of this unknown person in Ireland, no interest really in getting involved. I had my day job, my family. I wasn't really involved in anything faith related at that time, but I did feel this call to renew the Eucharist. I still do. It still means an incredible thing to me, and you'd love for some great bishop or priest to take up this cause in the church and just push it forward. And you're there waiting. Well, who will renew the Eucharist? Who will talk about Christ's presence in the Eucharist? And sooner or later, if you love something so much, you just have to take up that challenge. Maybe I'm not the most eloquent. Maybe I don't have a degree in theology. Maybe I don't have the best way of presenting myself on YouTube, but I do have a personal relationship with Christ. I believe. I have encountered Christ. I do know that he is calling us to be other Christs, that he's calling us to be transformed by him, that he's calling us to understand our spiritual DNA as children of his Father. And the Eucharist is this amazing food that divinizes us. Deification divinizes us. It is the number one thing in the church that we need to get clear. Once you understand divinization, theosis, which I discussed yesterday, once you understand the nature of God, and I know this seems a bit strange, but once you start understanding God, your life becomes totally transformed. if people saw this, they wouldn't be asking if God exists. The question wouldn't be, does God exist? But how does he exist? What way does he exist? How does he talk? How does he love us? They'd want to know him more. They wouldn't want to know if he existed. They'd want to know him better. It would be a challenge for people to know God better if we really fostered a better understanding of Christ's presence in the Eucharist. This is a massive failure in the Roman Rite, what we've done. It's very sad. We see out of the Vatican today, the development of the liturgy was clericalism, and it's a good thing that we've gone back to the early centuries, and we're doing the Mass like the early centuries, as if the Church is rushing to write off 1,000 years or 1,500 years of liturgical growth. The liturgy is the work of the people at the end of the day. And at the end of and also at the same time, Rome seems to be pointing the finger at Eastern, the St. James's Rite that you would experience, which St. John Chrysostom developed, pointing it at the Syriacs and all the Maronite, all the Eastern rites, and saying, well, look, you've really lost it with all that reverent liturgy, making the sanctuary like entry into heaven and all that. That's really strange theology there. Now you need to get with this man-centered worship that we have done, which has caused the complete collapse of the faith in the West, seemingly. Who wants to go to a pop concert in a church on a Sunday to listen to a dry homily sometimes? I ask the question. Or are we going to bring souls into that encounter with Christ in heaven? The questions need to be asked. Where are we going? What are we doing? And Mother Angelica certainly asked those questions. What have you done to the Mass? You can see it in her talks. What have we done to the faith? Why are we not teaching the faith? Why are we not bringing kids to encounter Christ in the Eucharist? To open up the channels, to open up the conversation, to allow them to be deified, to allow theosis to happen in their souls. If they knew who Christ is. I think this is the biggest challenge we have in the church today. It is the number one, the renewal of the Eucharist. Unless you know who is giving you the waters, unless people know who the Christ is at the well, that when he meets the Good Samaritan, unless people know who that Christ is, how are they going to move forward? Our faith is an amazing conversation with Christ. It's an amazing conversation with Christ. And I suppose those encounters, providential encounters, because, Christ comes along, puts me in these places which, I hadn't planned to visit the shrine of the Blessed Sacrament, but just happened to be there. So, look, I'll go over and visit. And, it's like Mother Angelica spurring us on, saying, what are we doing in the church? What are we doing? Rome is, change is not bad. I'm not against change. I'm not against the Novus Ordo, but sometimes, change can go so fast that we lose the basics. And that certainly seems to be what has happened over the last... We've changed for change's sake, it seems sometimes. But look, we can't live in the past and we can't live in the future. We can only live in the present. And it's up to us now as Catholics, if you love the faith, is to renew the Eucharist. If you love the faith, is to take up the challenge of deification, of understanding your spiritual DNA, of theosis, of understanding that nature inside of you that wants you to understand your Creator better, your Father in heaven. And you can only see this and understand this through prayer. And this is prayer and the Eucharist transform your soul. So a massive thank you to Mother Angelica for building that sanctuary. I've really, really enjoyed visiting it. I think any Americans that can, if you can go to that sanctuary, take a day or two to go to Alabama, Northern Alabama. Beautiful, beautiful places. There's Noccalula Falls or Gadsden Park. That area is also very, very beautiful. And people in Alabama, they make you really welcome. It's interesting. You're driving that side of America. It's like there are more Baptist churches than restaurants. It's Baptist church after Baptist church. It's quite fascinating area. And so in the midst of Baptist South, you find this amazing Catholic shrine to the Blessed Sacrament. It's surreal. It's amazing. And so I do encourage people, but I do ask people to take up Mother Angelica's challenge now. You know, she wasn't somebody against Second Vatican II. She quotes the documents, and she wasn't. You know, they challenged her. Bishops weren't overly happy with the way she was doing things, but this amazing woman, she understood what was happening in the church, I think, better than many people, and she left us this amazing legacy. We have EWTN, we have this shrine, and she is this amazing woman, this amazing leader. I mean, there's not that many women in the church that did what she did during her era to build churches and build TV networks, and you know, she's just this giant, giant saint in the church, and I can't wait for the day that she's beatified and canonized, because she is a saint. There's no doubt about it. You feel her presence when you go to that shrine. And I think she's spurring us on in this moment in time to renew the Eucharist. Anyway, God bless you. Take care. Pray for the church. So I thought I'd just share some a reflection of visiting this beautiful sanctuary shrine. We had the rosary here when I arrived, and then there was a mass down in the crypt. And what really impressed me was the mass is said ad orientem, so the new order of the mass. You know, really, really reverently, beautiful mass. You know, the communion rails are used. They even have communion cloths. If you go to the main basilica here, the communion rails has the communion cloth, and it is spectacular, really, really beautiful. I mean, it's just the love and that's been put into making this place what it is today. So highly recommend it. We went down to the crypt then, and that's where the tomb of Mother Angelica is. So, and there's a chapel there as well. But it's a very, very beautiful place to visit here in Alabama. It's kind of a strange sensation here, because you know, I spent 2 hours looking at Baptist church after Baptist church after Baptist church. I mean, this is the Bible Belt of America, and then you arrive to this beautiful oasis, this beautiful Catholic oasis here. So highly recommend that you come and visit this chapel. I mean, the monstrance they have in the main altar, the monstrance that with our Lord exposed, is one of the most beautiful things I've seen. And you know, it really just it screams out of the love that so many people have for our Lord, that Mother Angelica was able to construct this church. I mean, and it really just goes to show that the love, the sanctity that we should have for our Lord, and that we should make sure that the Blessed Sacrament and our churches are kept as places of prayer, recollection, of where we can meet the divine, you know, because that's the most important. So just some reflections. I'll put up some photos later.